Welcome back. I hope that your new chord progression with the inversions is beginning to improve and that you were able to work on the arpeggio etude, summer sunrise, and some old repertoire. I'd like to begin by reviewing the arpeggio etude today. This will allow us to start with something that you know and get your fingers warmed up at the same time. Be sure that you're sitting comfortably at the keyboard and have the bench pushed back far enough for the left hand to cross over the right. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. Next, let's review the new version of the primary chord progression in C. Remember, this is the progression that used the inversions of the subdominant and dominant seventh chords. I'd like us to play the left hand only right now. Let's put a repeat at the end so that we play it twice. 1, 2, and play. And again. Now that we've played that chord progression in the left hand, we are ready to try Summer Sunrise. Your left hand will stay in place. Be sure that your right hand is over the C major 5-finger scale. And we begin on E with the 3rd finger. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. I hope that your performance went well. Did you remember to keep the left hand softer than the right hand melody? You'll notice that on the score there is a mezzo forte, or MF, notated for the right hand, so you'll want to try to play it moderately loud. There is a piano sign below the left hand, so do your best to keep this hand softer. Including the dynamics and achieving the proper balance between the melody and accompaniment are both essential elements in making your performance sound musical. During your practice, when you think you have the dynamics, you might consider recording yourself. Just pull out your phone, do a quick recording, and listen back. Now, I will warn you that your dynamics may not be as pronounced as you think. The recording is accurate. As performers, we have to learn to exaggerate our dynamic contrasts. I encourage you to think about that as you practice Summer Sunrise this week. What if we review our transposition skills by figuring out the melody for Summer Sunrise in G major? If you put your right hand over the G major 5-finger pattern and prepare to begin on the 3rd scale degree, you should be playing a B. Then we move up by step to C and up another step to D. At that point, we descend by step in quarter note rhythms until we land on A with the 2nd finger. It will be tempting to keep going down, but notice that the first beat in measure 3 is a step above A, so you'll play B. Then you repeat the B for the beginning of your 8th note pattern and step back up until you reach D. Remember to leap down a 4th to an A in measure 4. Let's try the right hand of Summer Sunrise in G major. 1, 2, play. To figure out the left hand, it helps if we know the new version of the primary chord progression in G major. So I'd like to look at it right now. You already know the tonic chord, G major. In order to move to the 4-6-4, remember to keep the bottom note the same. The middle note goes up half a step to C, which you will play with finger number 2, and the top note moves up a whole step to E, so the thumb expands up to play it. If you go back to the tonic chord, we'll explore how to move to the 5-6-5 in the left hand. Remember not to move the top note under the thumb. It stays the same. The second finger is already over the middle note of the dominant 7th chord, the C, and the pinky expands down a half step to F sharp. As you know, F sharp is in the key signature for G major, so we have to remember to make the Fs sharp in the key of G major. Let's try the primary chord progression in G slowly with the left hand. Just the chord progression. Tonic, 4-6-4, back to tonic, 5-6-5, back to the 1 chord. You may need to rehearse this several times before trying the left-hand accompaniment with the transposed version of Summer Sunrise. But I'd like you to attempt Summer Sunrise in G with either the left hand or the right hand now. I'll play both hands so you can hear how it will sound once you've practiced it. 1, 2, 3. I have an etude, aptly called the chord etude 1, that will help you to learn the primary chord progression with inversions in another key this week. Let's preview it now. First, notice that there is a B flat immediately following the clef signs. We've memorized that when we have 1 flat, B flat in the key signature, the piece is in the key of F major. So there is a good chance that your hands will be over the F major 5-finger pattern on the keyboard. Indeed, if we look at the first notes in each hand and notice the fingering indications provided, we'll see that our hands are in an F major hand position. Next, notice that the left hand is playing an ascending broken chord. In measure 2, the right hand begins on C, 1 octave above middle C, and skips down by thirds. In measure 3, the left hand begins on F, then skips up a fourth to B, and then up another third to D. You'll have to expand your hand to play this. Hopefully you notice the fingering that is suggested, and you recognize this as the 4-6-4 chord. In measure 4, the right hand is also playing the subdominant chord, though it is the descending broken chord pattern here. Remember to expand the top part of your hand and use the correct fingering to improve accuracy. We go back to the F major broken chord in measures 5 and 6. I notice the leap of a fourth in the right hand between measures 7 and 8. If it helps you to circle the fourth on your score, remember to do so. I'll point out the 5-6-5 chord in measures 13 and 14 and let you work on the piece on your own before we meet again. In the meantime, I'd like to play it for you. I'll offer one additional practice suggestion that can be applied to any piece that contains chord patterns, such as this one. It's a practice technique called blocking. As you begin to recognize chord patterns more easily, you'll see all of the notes in a measure as one chord. If your hand is over all of the notes of the chord and you are ready to play all of the notes, you'll be able to play the arpeggio more fluently, and you'll even be prepared to play it more quickly. So, if we practice blocking the chords, playing each complete chord on the downbeat, your hands will learn how to be in place on time. It's a great shortcut to use during practice. I'll show you how the blocking practice will look for this etude. As you've no doubt noticed, when composers write music that has a melody in the right hand, they choose various ways to accompany the melody. We've seen melodies accompanied by single notes, as in the first version of Woodland Jaunt. We've also played melodies with blocked chords, like the left hand in Summer Sunrise, or with parts of chords or harmonic intervals, as in the Kohler melody. You also know that melodies can be accompanied by various kinds of broken chord patterns. At our next lesson, we're going to begin harmonizing melodies that don't have the left hand written out. So it's a good idea to have a stockpile of accompaniment patterns. I'd like to look at 3 left-hand accompaniment patterns today, and you can begin practicing them when you work on your primary chord progressions this week. The first type of accompaniment pattern is the broken chord pattern. Essentially, this is the ascending part of the arpeggio pattern that we've been playing. For the G major chord, it looks like this on this staff. You'll see that we have the bottom note of the chord on the downbeat, then we have the middle note of the chord on beat 2, and the top note of the chord is played on beat 3. This particular pattern works really well in 3/4 meter. Here we see how the primary chord progression looks if we play it with broken chords. On the piano, that progression played with broken chords sounds and looks like this. For these examples, I've omitted the intermediary tonic chord that we have been playing in our progressions. However, you can go back to the tonic chord between the subdominant and the dominant chords when you first start practicing these. Remember to use the same fingering as you did for the block chords. Consistency with fingering is critical for success. The second type of accompaniment pattern that I'd like us to learn is the waltz style pattern. This is also a pattern that works in 3/4 time. As you can see, we play the bottom note of the chord on the downbeat, but this time we play the top 2 notes of the chord together as a harmonic interval on beats 2 and 3. This is how the waltz style accompaniment looks and sounds on the piano. The third type of accompaniment pattern that I'd like to introduce today is called the Alberti bass. It's named for Domenico Alberti, a musician who lived and worked in Italy in the first half of the 18th century. The pattern sounds like this. You may recognize this accompaniment from a Beethoven or Mozart sonata that you've heard. It was a typical left-hand accompaniment pattern for music during the classical period. We'll discuss this in more detail later in our course. But for now, the important thing to remember is that when you play the Alberti bass pattern, you play the bottom note of the chord, then you play the top note, next comes the middle note of the chord, and finally we return to the top note again. This pattern works best in 4/4 time. Most of my students find the Alberti bass to be the trickiest pattern to learn initially. The coordination can be tricky. However, with consistent practice, it will become easier. Right now, I have another piece for you. It's an arrangement of a charming composition by Carl Czerny, who studied piano with Beethoven. It's called the Waltz in G. Although it's called a waltz, you'll notice that the left hand has a broken chord accompaniment pattern throughout. I'll let you work on the left hand on your own before our next lesson. But let's work through the right hand melody. First, let's clap the right hand rhythm together. I'll count as we clap. 1, 2, clap. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Next, let's identify the pitches that we'll play in the right hand. It begins with the third finger on B, the third above landmark G. This will be a seventh above middle C. Getting your hand in the correct octave on the piano is important, since your left hand will need to play middle C. You'll notice that there is a lot of stepwise motion and repeated notes in the melody. Try to keep track of where the notes change direction as you learn this. So we begin on B with finger 3. The B is repeated twice, then we move down by step twice until we reach G. We immediately turn around and go up by step to A on the downbeat of measure 3. That A is then repeated in measures 3 and 4. In measure 5, we play a C with finger 4. This is a third above the last note that you played. The C is repeated twice, then we move down by step twice until we reach A. We immediately turn around and go up by step to B on the downbeat of measure 3. That B is then repeated in measures 7 and 8. As you work on this, you may notice that the pattern of steps and repeated notes is the same in measures 5 through 8 as it was in measures 1 through 4. The fingers that you will play are different because the starting pitch for each phrase is different. Repeating patterns, starting on different pitches, is quite common in music, and it's called a sequence. We'll see more of these as our pieces become longer and more complex. I'll let you work through the second half of the piece on your own, at your own pace. Remember, you can always refer to my performance on the video if you have questions as you practice. I'll play this waltz for you now, using both hands, so you'll know how you want your performance to sound after you've practiced this. I expect that it will take several practice sessions before you can perform this hands together without hesitations. Just remember to use your practice steps that we outlined in our earlier lessons. Also be aware that there is a slight dissonance on beat 1 of measure 11. Try not to let the clash of pitches catch you off guard. Speaking of practice steps, I'd like to introduce another skill that pianists must work on and develop. It's commonly called sight reading or sight playing. It simply means that we try to play a piece of music as well as we can on the first try. Now, the pieces that we sight read should always be easier than the music we are working on. I recommend following 5 steps to ensure that we play our best the first time. First, scan the music to identify familiar rhythm patterns. Tap the rhythm hands together, keeping a steady pulse. Second, identify your starting pitches and place the correct fingers on those. Third, shadow the hands separately, noting intervals. Fourth, shadow the hands together. Fifth, play the piece out loud, but remember to choose an appropriate tempo. In your music book, you'll find a sight reading example in Lesson 11. Please practice this sight reading example by completing each of the steps that we just discussed before our next lesson. Finally today, I'd like to introduce 3 new major 5-finger patterns. I saved these until today because each has a black key as the tonic note. Even though we begin on a black key, we will still use the same whole, whole, half, whole pattern to identify the notes of the major scale, and we will use the same fingering. This is how D-flat major looks on the piano keys. The names of the pitches are D-flat, E-flat, F, G-flat, and A-flat. Here's how the D-flat major scale and chord sounds. Next, I'd like you to try the left hand only for D-flat major with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and play. Broken chord and block. Now let's try the right hand. 1 and 2 and ready, play. I'll do both hands. If you'd like to try both, go ahead. Otherwise, choose just one hand to play with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and play. You will find the notation for this and the next two finger patterns in your music book. Next, I'd like you to work on the A-flat major. The pitches are A-flat, B-flat, C, D-flat, and E-flat. It looks and sounds like this. Why don't you try the left hand with me? I have my left hand a little lower on the piano, so it's a little easier to play. 1 and 2 and ready, play. Now the right hand, ready, and play. And hands together if you can, otherwise choose just one hand to play with me. 1 and 2 and ready, play. Finally, I'd like you to learn E-flat major. The pitches that you'll play are E-flat, F, G, A-flat, and B-flat. Here it is. Now, won't you try the left hand with me? 1 and 2 and ready, play. Next, let's try the right hand. Ready, and play. And finally, try both hands if you can. 1 and 2 and 3 and play now. So I think that I've given you plenty to work on before we meet again. Take as much time as you need before you watch the next lesson, but try to set a reasonable goal for yourself so that you don't wait too long to check in with me. Here's what I'd like you to practice for next time. Review the 5-finger patterns and chords, including the new major patterns D-flat, E-flat, and A-flat major. Work on your primary chord progressions with inversions in C, G, D, and F major. Your music book has all of these notated for reference. Practice the 3 accompaniment patterns with the left hand in C, G, and F major, work on Summer Sunrise in C and G major, the Chord Etude 1, the Czerny Waltz in G, and your sight reading exercise. Until next time, enjoy working on these new skills and the new music, and happy practicing.